Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The New Standard. And as always, joining me, my partner in crime to my left, Neil Coulong. What's up, Big Neil?
Ready to go, Lance. I am ready to go. I enjoy the brief respite that you get the morning of day three of the draft before the real work sets in. You're looking at I'll be sitting staring at this thing for the next 9 or so hours, and that's after the last 2 days of doing it, in which I am kind of beat and kind of sort of looking forward to it being over. But it's a fun journey. I'm glad it gets to start here with you fine people. I hope everyone's doing well.
Yeah, the draft. I think what's your comments yesterday in terms of the draft, in terms of looking at the draft and how to evaluate the draft. And we'll discuss that question next Saturday when we do the show at 8:30 in terms of what is the proper perspective to look at a draft. But I think just in looking at the draft and looking at the players, not from a sense of, what they're going to do, but just from a sense of, from a needs perspective, just how good did your team address the particular needs that they have. And I'm sure if you're watching the show live on YouTube, make sure you go to the New Standard and do a search for Lance Williams or Neil Coulong, and make sure you like and subscribe to the program. On the ticker on the bottom of the show, you will see when the wife meets the girlfriend. And before we jump into that, I do want to say, if you want to subscribe to the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, go to Google Store or Google Play Store and look for the New Standard, as well as you can find it on Spotify. And the show is also available on any other podcast platform. Pick up the Ollie Howard Species. And the reason I wanted to call the show When the Wife Meets the Girlfriend, and pick up the double H, is I'm sure the irony was not lost on just me and Neil when Chase Claypool announced the Steelers' second round draft pick of George Pickens. Before we jump into that, let me just toss that to you, Neil. Before we jump into Pickens and we jump into how he may fit and how he may fit this offense and how he may fit in terms of the roster and how he may complement the roster, what's your thoughts on just when the wife meets the girlfriend and the irony of Chase Claypool potentially being introduced to on a national stage and introducing the world to his possible replacement?
First off, check the private chat. You're going to want to put that one up in the comments. We talked about this a little bit off air, Lance, and we'll bring the audience into this. We discussed on multiple shows leading into the draft, the Steelers needed playmakers, or dudes as we're calling them. They needed guys that could make plays, and they're down two receivers, or were going into this draft. They lost Juju Smith-Schuster, signing free agency with the Chiefs. They lost Ray McCloud to free agency where he signed with the 49ers. They needed probably some type of versatile inside-outside receiver, and they needed a slot receiver. To me, they absolutely could not get out of round two without drafting a receiver. The fact that they took Kenny Pickett in the first round, to me, strongly suggested, not guarantee, but if there's a receiver within reach, they're going to go get him. Pickens is a guy that I came into probably a little bit later in the process. I was kind of familiar of the name. You heard a lot about him as a freshman, but he got hurt and kind of fell off the radar a little bit. But on the advice of a couple people that I know and trust in this business, I went back and watched his tape, and the only thing you see from him is just explosiveness. And I was just like, oh wow, this kid's a playmaker. This kid is a big, deep ball threat, and absolutely what the Steelers needed. It just so happened that I saw an announcement, some press release that said, for whatever reason, Chase Claypool was going to introduce the Steelers' second round pick. And the thought in my head was right away, I think it's kind of normal. Most people would say this. What if he announces his own position? And the first guy I thought of was George Pickens, just because Pickens not going to be a first round guy, not with the injury, not with, not a whole lot of tape, some character concerns there, perhaps. The profile of a really good second round pick. I don't. I said to myself, "There's no way he's going to fall to 52." But man, if Chase Claypool announces that they're taking him, that'll be something. And the thought just kind of left my head. And the draft went on. There were some teams, the Patriots in particular, I thought would take a receiver, and they did. They took Tyquan Thompson, the kid from where did he go? Baylor, the really fast, skinny kid. I was a little surprised with that. I thought that's interesting that they weren't going for Pickens, but at that point, I had tweeted out what I had sent you in the private chat. Like it's gonna be Claypool announcing Pickens, and this is gonna be fantastic. People might remember this. You might remember the hubbub that was created back in the day when somebody keep me honest on this, because I feel like this happened a couple different times and it all sort of blends together. But there was a point Martavis Bryant snapped back at a fan after they drafted, I think, Juju, saying that Juju was going to be Bryant's replacement. And Bryant fired back at him that no, he's Sammy Coates' replacement. I'm not going anywhere. And then Coates got involved. And it was, I think Mike Tomlin jumped in on Twitter and told everybody to shut up. And it was just fantastic. But the meme has been going on ever since then. And it's like, of all people, Chase Claypool is like Chase Claypool in a year that you know that you're going to draft a receiver, and you know that you have a history of this that fans aren't going to forget about, bloggers aren't going to let you forget about. You can't put Claypool up there of all people. Like, how about this? This is what I thought of. Why go get Ramon Foster? I'm sure Ramon Foster would love a trip to Vegas. Have him announce the pick. Everybody in Pittsburgh loves Ramon Foster. Why don't you just have him do it? Why would Claypool do it of all people? And now I'm sorry, I have to instruct my staff to remember that moment and make fun of it for the next year. It's impossible not to. That history is already established. It just seems like something that could have been avoided. Yeah,
Now,
Claypool should pull a Martavis and say that's Johnson's replacement. Yeah, and there were a bunch of memes that went out. They doctor the original tweet with different names. And
yeah, the internet
it's a great running joke, and it just we just gave it more fuel. It just makes me laugh of why they would have Claypool, of all people, do that. Claypool would not be the one to do it.
Well, here's the funny thing about some guys. Some guys are so lack self-awareness to the point where he may not have even realized that. He might have just been like, this is just another guy that's going to be a baller with us. We're going to go dominate and, so on and so forth.
This guy watching the highlights make all these plays down the field. It seems like he's coming from out wide. Does he play my position? No. There's no way that's the case.
You know what? When you mentioned explosive, and I wanted to dig into the relative athletic score for George Pickens. Overall, it's 9.35 out of 10, which puts him in the green tier, which means he's elite. He was elite in height for the position. He was elite at the broad jump. His composite speed grade is overall great. His 40-yard dash was 4.47, which is an RAS of 8.2, which is elite. 20-yard split, 2.57, which is 8.87, which is elite. 10-yard split, 1.5, 9.76, which is elite as well. And so when you talked about explosive, he is absolutely explosive. I'm not sure if Chase Claypool's numbers were the equivalent in all those areas, but I do know Chase Claypool was a very high RAS guy, probably about a 9.9. So you have two explosive playmakers back there. And off wax, we talked about the X, the Y, and the Z. What I wanted you to do was to break down, not really considering, having tight ends flex out, but just looking at the X, Y, and Z, how that may play into, what that means from the wide receiver position and how that may play into how this player might be utilized. But before you do that, speak to Pickens' knee injury, because I've heard some Steeler fans kind of being puzzled and perplexed as to why the Steelers are, spending a second-round pick on a player who has some ACL injury histories. And my quick thought to that before I want to get your input is, I trust the doctors to do the medical. I mean, I'm not, I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn. I stayed in the Airbnb. So what that says is I don't have a medical degree. If the doctors are comfortable with the medical, then as Ollie Howard Species says, Lance, that's juice. They like the juice that the player provides. So speak to the medical and how, the Steelers probably, what their process might have been in determining the medical. Speak to the X, Y, and Z and how he may slot into that kind of classic nomenclature for wide receivers.
If let's start with the medical piece of it. Let's keep in mind they're given a pretty thorough evaluation with players when those players are available. It didn't happen quite the same way in the pandemic off season, but they have access to his history. They have the ability to speak to team physicians. Here's what I know to be factual. The Georgia doctors cleared him to play in 4 games last season, so I'm not quite sure what everyone's uproar is over the fact that he's hurt.
Exactly.
He played at the end. He played 4 games. Okay, this isn't Juju coming back for a brutal loss against the Chiefs. He played a month. That doesn't mean that he's fully healthy. Doesn't mean that he's ready to go. I mean, he's probably pushing it a bit because he wants to go pro, and that seems to have worked out for him fairly well, at least. Second round pick is no slouch for sure. You have to think that the fact that he was able to play, other doctors said that he could play, and the Steelers medical staff checking him out, I think they gave him a clear bill of health. I mean, you're looking for stuff to not like the guy if that's the case. I mean, come on. It's been a while for him. Yeah, he probably still has rehab stuff to do. And on top of that, he's going to want to probably get a little bit stronger. He's a skinny little dude. Tall guy. His frame will grow out. He's going to be a little bit bigger. He's not going to be a Mike Wallace twig looking guy out there. He can get a bit bigger. He can carry a little bit more weight and probably be a little bit more of an inside presence as well as a good deep threat. There's a lot to like about him. Period. I just love the kid. The explosion that he has. The sense that he has, he looks like a center fielder going for the ball. That's a high compliment for a receiver. He tracks stuff in the air. And frankly, that's one thing Chase Claypool does not do particularly well. Getting into that, what I'm really describing are high-end talents for what is traditionally and generally referred to as an X receiver. Okay. I want to preface all of this by saying the X, Y, and Z monikers are they're designations for different kinds of receivers. These are all players who are not lined up. They're not down linemen. They're not in the backfield. These distinctions were used probably a bit more when teams ran more balanced sets, more 2-back running formations, things like that. Today, it's not that they're not still used or not still valid, but you might have 2 of them on the field. When you run 4 receivers, you need more than 3 letters, right? So let's take this with a little bit of a grain of salt, all right? An X receiver typically is, we'll start with the position on the field. The X is always on the line, okay? They are typically on the wide side of the field or the weak side of the field, depending on how you want to set them up. Physically speaking, X receivers are the dudes that run outside the numbers. They are your deep speed, your big athletes. Chase Claypool, physically speaking.
T.O. Randy Moss.
So, yeah, sort of. I'll get into that in a second. Chase Claypool, physically speaking, in our vernacular for what we're speaking on here, is a quintessential X receiver. Martavis Bryant was a quintessential X receiver. It doesn't mean that they could not possibly do anything else. It's that they're prototypes for what the X receiver is. Big dudes on the line that can run outside the numbers and go up and get the ball in there. That's George Pickens. George Pickens doesn't have that size, but he's an X. He's a deep threat, great long speed, great hands, tracks the ball well deep down the field. Randy Moss and Terrell Owens were so good that they didn't have positions. They kind of did whatever they wanted to do.
They were otherworldly.
Physically speaking, yes, they were X receivers, but you saw with the Vikings, they put Randy in motion a bunch, and that was just to get the three guys who were covering him off of him in some way. T.O. was the same way for a stretch of his career.
Megatron as well was another guy.
Megatron is a classic X receiver that could be used as anything as his career developed. And at that point, too, offenses are getting much more versatile. They're getting much more creative. You have to use your weapons in as many ways as you can to get them the ball. So that's where the distinction kind of goes out the window. But for the sake of simplicity here, these do still have some validity to what we're talking about. So let's, for our context, Claypool is an X. The Z receiver is kind of your old school, what they would call a flanker. It's a guy that can line up really anywhere, on line or off, inside or out. They're the ones that are going in motion a bit more. And the Z's are the smaller, shifty, quick guys.
Let me ask you real quick. Did you consider Hines Ward a flanker?
Yes. Hines Ward was the Steelers' Z receiver in their day. Part of that, interestingly enough, and this is something I'm sure will be a part of whatever Hall of Fame pitch I would imagine Ed Bichette would give for Hines Ward. He's playing flanker in a very old school way. For example, you saw, if you're old enough to remember, the Steelers in the 2000s with Hines Ward, they started off almost every single game with Ward in motion and having him follow to the hole on a fullback lead dive to the running back. Ward was the lead blocker. Okay, your flanker was your lead blocker. That wasn't normal for anybody ever. I mean, that gives validity to the idea that Hines Ward was a very unique player. He did things that you didn't really see throughout history. He doesn't have a good comparable. Whether that puts him in the Hall of Fame, we'll save that for another show. But the point is, yes, Ward was on the inside. Ward would line up in twins on the inside, off the line. He could be on the line inside. He could be next to the tight end in power formations. Your Z is going to play the most different positions. It's the most complicated one. There are the most details to go over. Antonio Brown is your quintessential Z receiver in today's NFL. Deontay Johnson is the Steelers' Z receiver right now, and he's a good one. You're happy about that, but you're looking for shiftiness. You're looking for versatility. We've seen Johnson take end arounds. We've seen Claypool take end arounds too, I guess. But Johnson's running shorter stuff underneath. It's not that he doesn't go deep, but you could kind of consider them sort of like possession receivers for today's vernacular. Probably would have been a little bit more what they were back in the day. But they're very shifty, very quick, very fast athletes. Now, this is where it gets interesting, and there are other people that would weigh in differently on this. When you talk about your Y receiver, now old school football, you had a Z and an X because you only had two receivers on the field. Your Y typically was your tight end. Tight ends traditionally didn't even go out for pass patterns. They were tackle eligibles. In today's game, it's kind of flipped around. We've seen the rise of the slot receiver, which is really kind of a morph of a tight end and a Z, just in a smaller guy that tends to line up off the line. Now, think of it like this. If you are lining up 1 yard off the line of scrimmage, you've got to be pretty fast at the snap to get down and make up some ground, right? Slot receivers, because they're off the line to keep the formation eligible, they are not going to run very deep routes because they can't get that far down the field. They have to start a full yard back behind everybody else. Tack on a yard to anybody's time, they're going to go a lot slower than the people that have a yard head start on them. So they're the ones running probably more 6 to 9 yard routes. And because of that, they're cutting a lot more. They're the ones going in and over the middle. Tight end-ish sorts of routes from back in the day, except your slot can unbalance your formation from a passing perspective. The big reason for this, in my opinion, and that we can thank, well, no, I'm probably not correct on this, but I like to blame Peyton Manning for it, because what this really creates is rub routes.
Absolutely.
Under over with slot receivers is big for legal picks. They're not as close to the line. They don't have to go as far. But if you have a Z, put a Z on the line outside, a slot off the line inside. they're both going in on it immediately, like to a flood. In other words, they're at different depths and they're
Yep.
going the same direction across the formation. That's essentially a pick, because the trailer, which is going to be your Z, isn't going to be able to catch up over the middle. There's a legal screen there with the slot receiver that blocks out the defender from coming from the backside of the play. And obviously, we see in the red zone all the time, it's the slot cutting off of the Z to the
Yes.
pylon from the inside. The slot receiver gives you that kind of versatility. They tend to also be very quick. You need to be really explosive out of you got to be sudden. You got to be an accelerant athlete to be a slot receiver. Now, oddly enough,
Wes Welker.
Welker was an excellent slot receiver. Quick, shifty. Shifty guys, quick guys tend to be smaller guys, and they're not guys that need size to win inside. They need angles. They need, they need feet and they need hands. And
Cooper Kupp is excellent inside as well.
Cooper Kupp is actually an excellent example of a great Z receiver, in the sense that he can play anywhere. Cooper Kupp is a really good receiver. He's gotten, people raved about Cooper Kupp when he was coming out. Everybody kind of thought he's maybe a second round pick at best. He wasn't a first round pick, but everybody raved about how good he was going to be. And I watched him like, yeah, you see it, but I don't quite understand why everyone sees this limitless potential out of the guy. But whatever it was, they saw it. I see it now, because Kupp is nasty. Kupp is really good.
Ali Howard Species is hilarious when he said maybe they should just put Lyman Swede at the wrong letter. Let me ask you this question, Neal. In your breakdown, it sounds like the Steelers have two X's and a Z. And just classically, does that mean, before we start talking about the Steelers' third round pick, DeMarvin Leal, do you anticipate in day 3 of the draft that the Steelers will be looking for another wide receiver to kind of be a more traditional slot wide receiver to kind of balance the room? Because the room is two big guys right now and a versatile guy. I mean, you've got two samurai swords and a saber, right? Like you don't have a switchblade. You don't have that shifty guy on the inside that's going to move the chains, where you need Trubisky or Pickett or Mason Rudolph or one of these guys to make a very easy throw to move the sticks, or somebody to challenge in the seams in the red zone. Do you think they're going to look for another wide receiver to complement this room? Maybe look for one in free agency. You anticipate that in day 3, of the draft?
Here's the thing. What's interesting in this current epoch of NFL football, there's not a whole lot of value given to slot receivers and slot defenders. Slot defenders we used to call nickelbacks. Now the nickel could be anybody. It could be a third safety for all we know. There are guys specifically who defend the slot receiver, and with that they have inside duties. They tend to be in zone. There's a lot that they have to read on a defense, and conversely, the slot receiver has to also really kind of think like a tight end. Tight ends need to know depth. They need to know assignment. The tight ends and the offensive line need to know more than, almost as much, if not more than the quarterback does, of what's going on. They operate off of everybody else. They have to see what's going on and work in concert together. I would argue in hot situations, in blitzes today, the slot receiver has a big part of that. My opinion, and we'll never hear Mike Tomlin give it a straight answer on this. My opinion, part of a big reason why they put Juju Smith-Schuster in the slot is because Juju's really smart. He understood what a defense was doing. He understood what their protections were, and they wanted him close to go hot when facing a blitz. Ben can't stand up to the blitz and avoid it the way that he used to. Let's put Juju inside with him. Juju, you're not going to run much. We hope that you can get the ball, get your shoulders square, and get up the field, but we need you to know where that blitz is coming. We need you to know where Ben is going to go hot, and we need you to be that guy. And if you think of just pure volume of catches, they did a pretty good job with that. The reason I bring that up is mostly because there are a lot of calls to move Claypool inside. I don't know. I guess because they assume that somebody has to play there. We saw Chase Claypool play inside a little bit. One was one of the few touchdowns that Claypool scored last year when they caught Denver somehow or other. Denver got mixed up and it stretched out Von Miller, then the Broncos outside linebacker before he got traded, out to cover Claypool short. Naturally, they flip and give him a skinny post, and understandably, he beats Von Miller down the field, and nobody's around him for 50 yards, and he scores. Beyond that, this is just my opinion. I don't see anything about Chase Claypool that suggests he's smart enough to be a slot receiver. I don't know how well that works. Everyone's going to immediately point to, well, it's a mismatch. Yeah, but if he doesn't know what he's doing against the blitz, if he's not calling that stuff out, if he doesn't know where to go, you're creating a lot more problems than the mismatch that you think that you're getting down the field. I don't know if that's something that they would do, but I will propose this. One, the draft isn't over yet. Let's see what happens. They're still down a receiver. Two, free agency isn't over yet. The Steelers aren't broke.
True
They've
indeed.
got salary cap money left. Let's just, for example, because shame on me, I have not dug into this the way I keep saying that I'm going to. Let's just put aside everything about Cole Beasley that we know about Cole Beasley, all of the social media stuff and the anti-vax stuff that kind of makes him not very popular. Ignore that. The fact of the matter is, Cole Beasley is one of the better, if not one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. He's a free agent right now.
Yeah, his skill set would fit nicely if you could find.
If they could get him
Beasley
for $2 million a year, they would love to do it. If he wasn't a nut job, I'm sure that's why they won't do it. But Cole Beasley's a free agent right now. Through the draft, he's a free agent. He was not signed. He got cut in like February. He's had plenty of time to sign. Nobody signs him. The league doesn't recognize value of slot receivers and slot defenders. They get paid less. It takes them longer to sign. I don't know why, but that's just the way that it works right now. There are good slot receivers who are available in free agency. Okay. Be honest. Did anybody here know who the hell Ray McLeod was 2 years ago? No, you didn't.
And to your point, I hope they find, if they don't come back and hit, because there's another position group that we're going to talk about in terms of day 3 that I think they have to address before we jump into, and we'll do that, and we'll also talk about DeMarvin Leal, and we'll break that down. They need a Mewelde more of slot receiver, that type of guy who was a productive guy that was cheap, that plays the slot receiver position very well. Let me jump into these physical comparisons because I brought that up in terms of RAS between Chase Claypool and George Pickens. Claypool, in terms of RAS, is just a physical freak. He has
keep in mind with RAS too, that's not purely athleticism, that's size as well. And Claypool is enormous. That helps quite a bit. But yes, they are both great athletes.
And when you look at Claypool, his overall RAS was 9.99.
That's
his
because
height,
he's huge.
Yeah, his height 6'4", weight 235, bench press, all of those were elite in the 9s. His 40 was 4.42, 20-yard split was elite. The only category that Chase Claypool was not in the green category was his 10-yard split. And that's the one category in which George Pickens was better than Chase Claypool. But they're both in the 9s. I put the link up there in the chat. And I put it on Twitter as well, but they're both highly explosive, big, physical, athletic players. And I want to end the discussion of George Pickens based on something that Pittsburgh Rapunzel wrote on Twitter. And be patient with me. I may not be able to get this out. Pittsburgh picked a peck of Pickens. A peck of Pickens Pittsburgh picked. If Pittsburgh picked a peck of Pickens, what's the peck of a Pickens Pittsburgh picked? That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And that's why I love Steeler fans, because
who is that? Who wrote that?
This is Pittsburgh Rapunzel. And the irony of Pickens to I mean, come on, man. Pickens to Pickett. I mean, come on. The announcers are going to have a marvelous time with that. But let's jump to the third round pick of DeMarvin Leal. What's your thought on that pick? Defensive tackle out of Texas A&M. What's your thought about him, the player, and what they're saying with this pick?
Um, it's interesting to me. I'm not sure. Okay, let's break it down like this. In the past, what we have seen from the Steelers in a fluid environment, meaning this stuff changes, it gets tweaked. By and large, their fourth round picks tend to be kind of projects, high ceiling project types. Martavis Bryant was a good example of a fourth round pick. Let me amend that. Projects with upside that need work, developmental guys with good upside, or injury risk issue types. James Conner was taken with a third round comp pick, which was essentially a fourth round pick. I'd call that an injury type of risk that you might not take in another round. That's a good round for them to take it, is the way that they view that. Gerald Hawkins was an injury risk with high potential type of guy. He was a fourth round pick. I believe Chooks was a third round pick, wasn't he? I think he was a third round pick. But the lines of that blur a little bit depending on how many picks you have, where you're looking to get whatever. I think DeMarvin Leal, there's a lot to like with him. He has a great build if he adds some weight. He's built kind of like a defensive end, like a 7 technique defensive end. He'd be a big 7 technique defensive end. Doesn't quite have that explosion outside. Inside, it's the cliche now is the NASCAR line when you put 4 defensive ends down to rush the passer. He's that kind of a defensive tackle, a good pass rusher, but not a real consistent pass rusher. I think what they see with him, just like what they saw with Isaiah Loudermilk last year, somebody they traded up for in the 5th round, which is weird because they avoid the 5th round like the plague nowadays. They see a project with a great build. Loudermilk is massive. He's a big dude, and he moves like he's a lot smaller. Very athletic, very strong, a lot of potential with him. I think even on this segment, I made fun of the pick last year, the trade up for the pick. I watched him play, and I totally see why they made the move that they did. And he's going to be good. I think he's going to be one of their better defenders after a little while. With DeMarvin Leal, I think they're looking to get another project type that they can build and develop. I don't think this is just me. It's my opinion. We'll see what they think of him. I think he's a little underweight. I think he's going to have to pack on 15 healthy pounds and stay fast. And the thing with him is he needs to add weight, but he looks way skinnier than he weighed in. He weighed in at 283. Looks like he's about 265. I mean, he's not like huge. You'd think he'd be bigger if he was where's he list at 6'4", 285. You'd think he'd look like that more. He really doesn't. So as Terrell Austin said last night, they're going to start him at defensive end. I think that's probably the right position for him, but they're training their defensive ends and tackles kind of the same way now. They're moving them inside and out. Cam Hayward's been doing that for years. I think they're kind of wanting to build versatility to give them some options along their line. If the Steelers view a pick at the back end of round 3, which is really where they were when they drafted Leal, I could see why they would have taken him. Maybe it was a little bit early, but maybe they absolutely wanted a defensive lineman in round 3, and this is a guy that they really wanted to have. We'll see. I think it's intriguing with him. He's a strong dude for his size. Let's see what's going to happen to him when he's going to have to add weight, probably 15 pounds, which could drastically change you as an athlete. Let's see what comes of that. I I would expect, this is just me, I would expect much of this year to be kind of a redshirt year for him. He's going to have to hit the weight room. He's going to have to eat. He's going to have to, work on his technique. But an interesting pick. I'm intrigued to see what he can do because, frankly, if there's a defensive position, the Steelers train better than defensive linemen. I don't know what it is. They've done a great job by and large with the guys that they brought in there, and they needed some depth there too. So I hope it works out.
Speaking of training defensive linemen, I think we saw last year, and this is a great segue into day 3 of the draft. And really quickly before I do that, his RAS score was 7.43. In terms
Size.
of his, yes, size was the issue. In terms of weight, he was in the red category. His bench press was in the red category because he only benched 225 17 times. In terms of composite speed,
it's weird. What's his length though? He's got super long arms. All that.
33.25. They have it listed.
Okay, yeah. Dudes like that can't chuck up, 35 reps at 225 on the bench. That's a long way to go. Your muscles are a lot longer. They're not that compact that you need to get that many reps up. He plays strong. He plays.
The interesting thing, though, when you look at him in terms of RAS, is his composite speed grade is in the elite status. His 40-yard dash is elite. His 20-yard split was in the yellow category, which was just a little bit under. It fell. 10-yard split was elite. His composite agility grade, the shuttle and the 3-cone, were both elite. His 3-cone was 9.78, which shows he can move and change direction. But when you look at this Pittsburgh Steelers team, in terms of things that I think that they need to look for in day 3, I mean, one of the biggest concerns, we railed against the offense particularly all year, but we also were very critical on their inability to stop the run. What's your thought overall of their defensive line room? And because me, I'm not overly excited about it. I mean, you have Cam Hayward, of course. Loudermilk is developing, but the issues with Tuitt and Alualu, if those guys don't play, all of a sudden, your defensive lineman room, your linemen, your ends, your tackles, that whole room. I mean, it's almost as bad as. No, not as quite as bad as the wide receivers were as of yesterday or the running backs, but that still seems like a glaring need that the Steelers may need to focus on day 3 and as well in the back half of free agency.
Let's keep in mind they did retain Montravius Adams, who they plucked off of the Saints practice squad, and when he got some time to adjust to the scheme and everything like that, you started to see a lot of the glaring problems with their run defense. And they absolutely had it. I'm not letting anybody off the hook for that. But when Adams got in and he got comfortable and he got solid, they started to improve. And you could see Adams is good. It's like, how is this guy on a practice squad anywhere? Steelers struck gold with him as far as I'm concerned. He saved the back half of their season. They were terrible up front. Isaiah Buggs didn't make it through the season. They cut him. I'm not sure, they keep drafting Carlos Davis's replacement. I'm not sure how much longer he's going to stick around. They're overhauling that front. That isn't to say they will or they won't address it again, but I think the fact that they brought in a 3rd-round pick this year, no more undrafted Isaiah Buggs, no more 7th-round Carlos Davis. We'll see what happens with Tuitt. Just put that off to the side. Alualu, I guess, is coming back. Maybe, he doesn't make it through camp, but I could see there being a lot of need to have both Alualu and Adams on this team. I see the value in that. So with those things in mind, I think there's an attitude that comes with it. My worry more than anything, Lance, on the defensive line is that Cam Hayward gave pretty much all he had left over the first 2/3 of the season. And part of their run defense issues last year was the fact that Hayward collapsed. And it's probably because that dude was working twice as hard as anybody else on defense was. Do you remember what was the Chargers game when he got like 6 yards of penetration into the backfield and then had to run the running back down 50 yards down the field?
Yeah.
And they got in a fight after it. There was nobody else on defense on that play. The defensive performance in that Chargers game and the Vikings game make me sick. It was so bad. Hayward, honestly, I think Hayward took games off the end of his career because of how hard he had to work on the back half of the Steelers season, and he couldn't go anymore. I just don't think he had anything left. And that Vikings game was on a short week at the end of the season. He was gassed, and there was nobody picking up his slack. Nobody. And that really, to the point where it's like, you know what, get rid of all of them. This is how it's going to be. Hayward hit legendary status with his season last season, and I hope he doesn't have to go as hard and he can be fresher throughout the year. And there are other people on defense that actually want to play defense this year.
Let me jump into a couple of questions that we have in the board because I think they tie nicely into what the Steelers might be looking for on day 3. Corey Hatcher, big up to Corey, asked, do you think they add another edge type player on day 3? I think they do, and I think they may add a running back as well. What's your thoughts on Corey's question?
You never know with a position like a pass rusher. You can never have too many of them. It depends on who's there. You might recall there was a little hubbub last year when they drafted an edge rusher in the 6th round. I think in the idea of developing him and having him play special teams and serving as kind of a utility guy. They hope to get Quincy Roche on the practice squad. That didn't work out real well.
Roche.
I will say this: they still have NDSU alum Derek Tuska, who I thought availed himself fairly well. I wouldn't be surprised if they keep him in that role. Not a guy that you want on the field for 25, 30 snaps, although that's the situation they found themselves in. Thanks, Melvin Ingram. Tuska can be a good special teams player along with a reserve outside linebacker. I'm stalling for time here, Lance. You'll have to forgive me. They signed an outside linebacker. I don't know who it was. Not anybody of prominence, some random dude that we've never heard of before he got signed. But they brought in somebody. I don't think they're going to draft one. Call that a hunch more than anything. I think they have a fairly decent unit there. I like TJ Watt's chances of making this team. I think Alex Smith is going to make this team. Depth behind that, Tuska gives you something, and the guy that they brought in, somebody looked that up. Yes, Derek Tuska was a captain of the melanin deficient crew and an NDSU alum. I'd like to add that part as well. All told, I don't think they're going to take that, but I will say this: they absolutely need to take a running back. Now, here's the problem that I have. 4th round pick gets you McFarland. 5th round pick gets you Benny Snell. You already have McFarland and Benny Snell. What
That's a great point. That's a great point you made.
And yes, it's general, but I'm just saying that is a relatively fair assessment of the kind of player that's going to be there. Do you want to do that, or do you want to dip into free agency? Do you want a veteran to back up Najee Harris? Because the rookie isn't going to he's not going to get playing time.
Let me answer that question. In my opinion, I always talk about Mewelde Moore. I loved Mewelde Moore. I absolutely love Mewelde Moore. That's the type of player that they need to target. If that player is available, I don't know. Of course, I'm not scouring NFL free agency, but they need a Mewelde Moore guy. They need, I think, a complement to Najee, who's a slugger, plotter, that's going to get you, maybe 4 yards in a cloud of dust, a lot of volume to get a lot of production. They need a 3rd down back, I think, a complement to him. I don't know if a Giovanni Bernard is available in free agency.
I think he just signed back with the
Cincinnati, but they need
the Bucks. He was with the Buccaneers.
Oh, that's right. He's with the Bucks. They need a veteran complementary wide receiver before they run all the juice, the little bit of juice that Najee Harris has out. So we're talking about defensive lineman. We're talking about running back. Any other positions you think they'll target in day 3?
I think they might want to. I don't know. I think any one of them probably has just as much value as anything else, except maybe potentially they want to sign an inside linebacker. Now that I'm thinking of it, I think maybe the guy they signed was an inside linebacker, not an outside linebacker. So maybe edge does make sense. Throw that up there. Edge and running back are probably the two that I would want to see above anything else. You're gonna have
Let
to
me
go
throw.
solo here for a second, Lance. I'm having a slight domestic emergency.
Oh, no worries. No worries.
Hold on.
Here are another couple of interesting questions, and I want to give a big shout out to my man, my mellow. Get on the mic because I know you eat Jello. To my man Ahmad Jamal, big up AJ. Hayward, that's interesting. I would love a second versatile tight end, but I'm not sure they're going to do that. I mean, I think he might be an upgrade to the last Watt brother who did not get the genes that the other two got. So he could be an upgrade, but I don't think they're going to go in that direction. In terms of Anthony Miller, and thank you, AJ, for that question. In terms of Anthony Miller being utilized as a slot, I mean, I don't really think so. I think Anthony Miller, to me, he fits the profile physically at 5'11, 199 pounds. I mean, but he's a $723,000 salary guy. That's not a guy that you're going to play a lot in 11 personnel. I don't think that they have the slot receiver on the roster. And welcome back, Neil. And there was a question here that Douglas Cooley II asked about your thoughts on Anthony Miller as a slot guy. And my thought was, I think Anthony Miller is a camp guy. You know, and part of it, and sometimes guys outperform what their salaries are. We see it all the time. But Anthony Miller is a 700K guy. I don't know if that's your slot guy in 11 personnel. I mean, James Washington couldn't even see the field in 11 personnel, and he was their second round draft pick. I don't know how you think that.
Watson. They played Watson on the outside though. The Steelers
Yeah,
haven't paid their slot receiver ever. Juju is the only one that ever made more than the minimum, and I'm not even sure it's fair to say he was not brought in to be their slot receiver. Going back
no,
to Eli Rogers, he made
yes,
nothing. Ray didn't make anything. They're not paying that position a whole lot, so I don't think the money disqualifies him necessarily. It's the fact though that Anthony Miller, to my knowledge at least, hasn't played inside. Maybe they've worked him at that. I don't know. He hasn't gotten a whole lot of time. He's been with the team for a while. There's got to be some reason for that. Maybe it's exactly that. McDonald. God, now I'm doing it. McLeod started the same way. He kind of stuck around early. They kept him around. You weren't really sure what he was going to do, just judging by his makeup and his college film. You think he was going to play inside, and he did. Miller didn't really show to be good enough at anything. There's a reason he's on the Steelers, and he was on their practice squad after being a second round pick. he showed the ability to play an X and a Z role. I'm not sure if he could play the slot, but maybe it's him. I don't know.
it's interesting that Eli Rogers. I always thought Eli Rogers was a solid player. Now I think he's playing arena football, possibly, and he
He was there
never.
for a bit.
Yeah, he never made it back. I know he was with the Montreal Alouettes, Tampa Bay Bandits. I thought Eli Rogers was a very good slot receiver. So, second day, I think me and you agree. Running back, defensive lineman. Any chance they go safety? They look for a safety late because of Terrell Edmonds being on the last year of his deal, or just the 1 year deal. That they look for a quote unquote strong safety in his second day?
I would say probably not. You have to fill out special teams, and they know that. Miles Killebrew is closer to special teams captain than he is starting safety, but he is a safety. You have to count him up that way because you have to assume your backups are going to be in a position to have to play. So they need to be able to play a position. In Killebrew's case, he's a safety, and you've also got Norwood in there along with Minka and Edmonds. Would they keep 5 safeties? Sure, maybe. is that safety there right now for them to draft? I'd imagine they want to take it pretty quick if that's what they wanted to do. I love Trey Norwood. I think he's going to be a great player,
They
mostly
do have Trey
because
Norwood, yes.
what's that?
I was going to say, yes, they do have Trey Norwood as a guy who could
Yeah,
possibly slot into that safety position with a little more
that's
seasoning.
the thing though. The odd thing with Norwood is he doesn't really have a defined position. He's more of a slot defender. He's not a traditional safety in any way, and he's not going to be. They're going to use him situationally in sub package football, in um, defending on the slot. And that's what he did when he made plays last year. He did a really good job. He is a good slot defender in the kind of look that the Steelers had started to implement last year. Don't forget Carl Joseph. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. I can't believe I forgot Carl Joseph.
Yeah, they
I
do have
don't,
Quadros, yes.
I don't think Carl Joseph's going to make the team. Call it a hunch. Um, as long as the NFL is going to, I think they relaxed the expanded practice squad, but they're going to keep the ability to hold more veteran players on the practice squad. If that makes sense. That's what Joseph really is for them. If they are still allowed to elevate two guys from the practice squad, he's a decent guy to have around in reserve, but he's not an option as far as planning your defense. Well, probably would have done something by now if he was going to be able to do that. I don't think they'll draft a safety. I'll say that. I think if they draft a defensive back, it'll be another corner,
I hope so.
and it'll be the project type as well. And I think it'll be a little bit later. I'll bet they would look at edge in round 6. I think running back in 4 or 5. Going over what else there might be. I mean, are we set on their tight ends? We have yet to
There
talk
was a
about tight
question.
end at all.
And Ahmad Jamal, my boy Ahmad Jamal 22 asked the question, what about Baby Hayward? Is Baby Hayward a possible as a tight end to bring in?
He's not a tight end. I mean, he's
Hybrid.
We've sat and talked ad nauseum about Derek Watt, and it's plain and obvious that there is zero interest in Derek Watt contributing much of anything offensively. Do you want to draft Connor Hayward if that's the role that you feel for him, based on? No, you've got to be kidding me.
Breaking news.
Sorry, there's a joke that I have in social media that the Ravens draft my players all the time, and they just drafted University of Minnesota mammoth offensive tackle Daniel Falele, which is the guy I absolutely wanted the Steelers to pick up, but knew that wasn't going to happen. Falele, incidentally, is about 6'9", 380 pounds, and is like somehow 10% body fat or something like that. He started playing the
Tongan
game.
or Samoan?
I think he's Tongan. And I'll look that up, but he is an absolute physical specimen. This dude, he started playing football like a sophomore in high school. His junior year, he transferred to IMG. That's how good he is. That's how good of an athlete he is.
Yes.
Played 2 years at IMG and started for the University of Minnesota as a true freshman, and played 4 years for them at right tackle. He's 3-time All Big Ten. The dude has barely played the game. He is just so big and he is so athletic. I can't believe he went in the 4th round. I thought he would have gone higher than that, but of course he's a Raven. Of course he's a bleeping Raven. That's 3 guys this year that they took.
Well, Neil, I want to go ahead and conclude the program and thank everybody for hopping on. Fantastic discussion today. Thanks to Ahmad Jamal, my boy Ahmad Jamal, Douglas Cooley, Corey Hatcher, and everybody out there who asked some fantastic questions. So before we get out of here, we're hoping, and I think we're looking into our black and gold crystal ball, thinking that the Steelers may target running back, corner, defensive lineman, and I'm sure there'll be some surprise picks in there, but I'm sure they will not target a long snapper. I'm pretty sure of that.
I'll never make that promise again. They took the long snapper in the 6th round, and you make the damn team. I love that. Like if that everyone's thinking, oh, that's easy money. They drafted a long snapper. There's no way he's not going to make the team. Nope, got cut.
And with that, Neil, we're going to go ahead and conclude the program. Thank you, everybody, for chiming in, man. This has been fantastic. 3 straight days. Make sure you like and subscribe to the program. Please share the program with others. I think we've done a fantastic job giving you some fantastic content. If you are watching day 3 of the draft, please enjoy it. Get a beverage, get some popcorn, get a snack, and we're going to go ahead and conclude the show. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. Go Steelers.